in this plenary is Mr. Nabil al-Kurd, member of the Sheikh Jarrah Committee in Jerusalem. It is a pleasure and honor to have you speak, sir. You have the floor.
I would like to thank the committee that invited me to this conference. I'm just a normal inhabitant of Jerusalem, and I suffer from occupation like any other Palestinian in Jerusalem. I'd like to introduce myself. Nabil al-Kurd. I'm a Palestinian. I was displaced from Haifa. I live with my family in addition to many other families displaced in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood since 1956, based on an agreement between UNRWA and the Jordanian government. In 2009, there was an increase of attacks by settlers against Palestinian homes. This was with full support of the Israeli state. They took 3 of our houses in Sheikh Jarrah, including half of my own house. I have the official papers that prove that we live there since 1956 in accordance with the agreement between Jordan and UNRWA. The Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood is a Palestinian neighborhood close to the heart of East Jerusalem and the Old City. It is now suffering from settlements by Israeli settlers and with support of the Israeli government. Even though this neighborhood has special status as part of East Jerusalem and in accordance with international law, it is occupied territory that the Jews cannot take any part of. I speak on my behalf and on behalf of the committee of Sheikh Jarrah and the inhabitants of East Jerusalem to describe to you our suffering with the Israeli government and the Israeli settlers in 3 points. Number 1, expropriation of the houses of Palestinians. 2, the right to residency and the legal system that is racially discriminating against Palestinians. And number 3, settler violence against Palestinians with the protection of the Israeli soldiers. After years of the occupation of East Jerusalem and the West Bank in 1967, forced displacement increased, with increasing threat against Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah. It culminated in 2008 when 12 families were evacuated from their homes. That was over 70 people, including over 25 children. My family and myself lost half our home that was given to violent settlers in 2009. Pressure continues on the neighborhood of Sheikh Jarrah and on many neighborhoods of Jerusalem, such as Silwan and Tur and Al-Isawiyya and Damascus Gate, etc. And now there are 2 families under the spotlight in order to evacuate them and expropriate their house and land. On the list, 9 other families awaiting their turn, only in Sheikh Jarrah. This threat of expulsion and displacement is expanding in all of East Jerusalem, which includes at least 90,000 Palestinian citizens. Over 20,000 houses are under threat of demolition in Jerusalem because they built without authorization. And to get an authorization, it takes a long time, is very expensive, and at the end, we get absolutely no authorization. The laws that are used by settlers to claim our houses in East Jerusalem, we as Palestinians, we cannot refer to the same laws to get back our houses lost in 48. Most of us have property in cities of 1948, but in no way through the Israeli law can we claim property before Israeli courts in order to be able to live in our houses as they do since thousands of years, not since 1948 only. Considering the Israeli law, we as Palestinians, we are forced and pushed to leave Jerusalem, so that we lose our residency and become displaced and can never go back to live in Jerusalem. And if we do move to live outside of Jerusalem for more than 7 years, we lose our right to live in Jerusalem. At the same time, Jews are encouraged to live in Jerusalem whenever they want. As a Palestinian, I was outside Jerusalem and outside Palestine. I tried to go back since 1971, and I was not allowed. However, in '96, I was able to enter Jerusalem. I fought for 10 years to get my residency again, to live in my own land. I'm born in 1948 in Nazareth. But the Israeli, as soon as he steps at Ben Gurion Airport, he gets his citizenship and becomes, he could be American or Polish or Romanian or any other nationality, and suddenly he becomes Israeli. Settler violence is also a problem. They cross my garden. I'm telling you my own story, but in fact, my story is the same in many other locations of Jerusalem. What I live others even worse. They cross my garden to go to the occupied piece of my own home that was converted into a barrack. They have rifles, trained dogs. They beat us several times, including women. My mother is now 95 years old. She was beaten 4 times. My sister 6 times. And every single time, it was such severe beating, they had to be transported to the hospital. They have no sympathy at all. There are many examples in all of Jerusalem, not only in Sheikh Jarrah. The Israeli police, they protect the settlers. If we call on the police following any attack by settlers, they come hours and hours later, and him who's beaten is beaten, and him who fled has fled. As for the contact by the settlers, they come immediately. So we stopped complaining or calling the police, because any Palestinian who calls or complains becomes accused and is taken to the police station. I was taken once. A policeman took me to complain, and I was imprisoned, not the settler. What I mentioned to you refers to physical attack. Can you imagine the horrible psychological effects, especially on children? Children suffer nightmares, involuntary wetting, they're afraid to leave the house, and many things. Some have psychological trauma, some have dropped out of school. So there are many, many things, not only in my neighborhood, in all of Jerusalem. As a committee, we have one request to all those who support the question of Palestine. Try, at least, as there is a right for the Israelis to live in Israel, the bigger right is to the Palestinians, the owners of the land, to live in Palestine. The Israeli law aims at the expulsion of Palestinians. It is all against the Palestinians. So we call on international law. As a normal person, I'm no politician. What I know of the UN is that all the resolutions of the UN on Palestine, we have not seen the implementation of any of them on the ground. But in other places, and not like Palestine, we've been suffering for 68 years now and displaced of our lands. In other areas, why not take a resolution under Chapter 7 of the UN? We call on everybody who is in solidarity with us to put pressure even on the UN. At least implement one single resolution so the Palestinians can live. As we say, we have a proverb that says we are living simply because we're not dead. Regardless of what we do, we get beaten. Any person can be just slapped by any Israeli, whereas if I carry just a razor, I am imprisoned. Many people are now afraid even of leaving their homes, so they do not see the Israeli soldiers. They say very clearly, they say clear and loud, that these settlers are an arm of the Israeli occupation. They get a salary even when they take our houses. They get salary in order to fight the inhabitants of the land. Our neighborhood is from Plan 2020. It starts from Sheikh Jarrah, goes around the old city, so that the number of inhabitants would not exceed 8 to 10%, and they would be just workers to serve Israel. The rest will be kicked out, even though they speak out of 70 and 30%, but in fact we do not see that on the ground. On the ground what we see is they try to force us out in any way, through fines, taxes, expropriation, no documents. And our conflict in Sheikh Jarrah from the 1970 till now, they were able only to take 3.5 houses. But that means 12 families, including mine, 13. They took half my house. If they had any proof of property, they would have taken it all. They submitted a Turkish document, and we proved it does not exist. But until now, the Jews want this land through the policy they are using since before 1948 to evacuate the Palestinians out of their land and bring in Jews from all around the world. We, the Palestinians, if we have more than a nationality, we have two, Palestinian and Jordanian. As for the Jews, they have 123 nationalities. And how do they live now in my land? I don't know. I hope you hear my voice. As people, we need legal pressure on the UN in order to implement at least one resolution under Chapter 7. Thank you.
I would like to thank Mr. al-Kurd for his presentation and for sharing his knowledge. It's good to hear from the ordinary inhabitants of Jerusalem about day-to-day life in that city. We thank you for your active participation in this meeting. Now we're ready to start a discussion. Participants are welcome to ask questions or make comments on the presentations that they have heard this afternoon. We shall take a few comments or questions from the audience at a time. Then our speakers will have the opportunity to respond, and we shall continue like this. Please introduce yourself as you ask your question. You'll make comments at the beginning and make your interventions as brief as possible. The floor is now open for questions and comments. Yes, sir, in front. Okay, I'm taking note of you.
Barrow, Mr. Barrow.
Sharif.
Let's start with here. Okay, please go ahead, sir.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Let me introduce myself. I am Professor Babakar Diop. I'm a lecturer at the University Sheikh Anta Diop of Dakar and a member of the Palestine Friendship Group. Chair, I would like to begin by congratulating the presenters for the very heart-wrenching presentations and very clear presentations on the theme of this international conference. One of the things I note from what they have said is that when force opposes law, then peace is difficult to attain. I see that the prevailing sentiments are fear and anxiety. So I have the following question. There's the challenge on both sides relating to information and education. Both of the populations, be they the Palestinian population, be they the Israeli population. The question is whether or not the population is fully enough informed about the entire process. Do they know how things have led up to where they are today, from 1948 up until the present day? And in whose interest is it really that the situation continues on and on? I wonder, has there been any sort of thorough follow-up with respect to how to address the challenges through education for peace? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There was one hand there from the special guests. Please, go ahead, sir.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Let me introduce myself. My name is Usman Bajan, member of the Democratic League, LA, which is led by Mamadou Ndoye. In our delegation, there are 3 representatives, Mamsei Sek and Mr. Mamadou Gueye, as well as myself. May I sincerely thank you for having invited us to this conference, which is a most timely one. We were really deeply touched by the testimonies that we have heard in this hall. How can it be that a people find themselves in a situation of constant and permanent insecurity, confronted by all forms of violence, continuous expulsions, demolition of property, in short, persecution? What I'm saying is that we truly are sensitive to the drama that the people of Palestine are experiencing and have been experiencing for several years now. But despite all this, this is a people who demonstrate courage, determination, and when it comes to recovering their freedom, we remain convinced that sooner or later the people of Palestine shall vanquish. They will have victory, because we have seen apartheid, a policy of oppression and of racism. And yet, in the final analysis, the apartheid regime collapsed. We are convinced that sooner or later the Palestinians will recover their freedom so that they can live a decent life, so that they can lead a normal life, and life that is a life of dignity, which is the right of every human being. This is why our party has always been in solidarity with the struggle of the Palestinian people. And at each of our congresses, we have had resolutions in defense and support of the people of Palestine, which is why we'd really like to thank you for having involved us in this international conference, which is so important. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There was one question from there, and then we go to the front row here. Please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Mohamed Barrow. I am a journalist, and I am an activist also for the Palestinian cause. Now, I simply would like to recall and also ask those who are sitting at the head table, particularly the lady who was talking about rights, to come back to one aspect. Those who are suffering today from the consequences, from the hardships, killings of the Israeli Zionist regime are not only the Palestinians. Pedagogically speaking, we talked about the situation of Palestinians. They are victims in their own homes, but it is the whole world which is suffering from the consequences of the Israel occupation, and it is good to say so in such conferences. I would like to remind us that here in Senegal, all the religious leaders, when they went to Mecca, they had the time and the possibility to go through Jerusalem and to do their pilgrimage, to complete their pilgrimage. But those stages are no longer possible, and the Christians who live in Senegal and elsewhere in Africa can no longer do that practice. And preventing people from praying on Fridays, it's not a problem of Palestinians, it is a problem of concern to the whole world. And today, on the 3rd, we are celebrating the World Day of the freedom of the press. Journalists, members of civil society, members of NGOs are in the Israeli prisons. They are being killed. They are prevented from doing their job. They cannot point to the resolutions that Israel is not respecting. And it is good to say so in such conferences. And today, Senegal plays an important role because it is heading the Committee on the Inalienable Rights of Palestinians. So Senegal, African countries, the African civil society must go hand in hand to echo this battle, because we can do things that we have not done so far. Thank you.
Voilà, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Can we go in front and we'll come back to you in the next session, maybe.
Ah oui.
Mr. Raoudi.
Excusez-moi, Président.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I had asked for the floor already.
From different parts, just to give it a good representative feeling. I'll come back to you. Please, sir, you have the floor. There's something wrong with your mic, sir.
شكرا سيد الرئيس، شكرا للمتحدثين على هذا الاقتضاب في شرح حول ما يحدث.
Thank you very much. Thank the speakers for their exhaustive interventions on what happens in Jerusalem. My name is Ahmed Rudi. I'm a citizen of the city of Al-Hud. I have 2 comments to make on we'll talk about Mohamed Lahtir. Mohamed Lahtir was killed, and the killer was involved in that crime, was sentenced for life. He had a life sentence. Mohamed Lahtir, I would recall, is a Palestinian who was kidnapped in front of his house in a neighborhood of Al-Hud. So they burned his body in one of the neighborhoods in Al-Hud, in the western part of Al-Hud, and the police refused to arrest those who were involved until the video was made known to the public, and they were brought before justice. But in fact, in doing so, justice does not leave going all the way to the High Court as they do for Palestinians. And this reminds me of another event on a matter from Jericho, when there was a Palestinian soldier at Hebron. Sorry, it was Hebron, when a Palestinian military, an Israeli military, shot at a Palestinian, and they refused to give him the first, provide him with the first health care. And that military was even congratulated for what he had done. Now, these trend, this desire to kill can be seen every day when you have the settlers who are carrying weapons, who roam around the streets, and they were even congratulated by the authorities in the government. And you see a government which is there, which authorities in place and a government made up of settlers who, in fact, sponsor and the occupation of the West Bank. So could we now think of a movement? We have to think about it. We have to say it loud and clear and seriously. Have a movement in place, even if it is at a limited level. A movement that would be an obstacle to this, that would create obstacles and fight against this upsurge of violence. It would be a step forward against these right-wing extremists. And I congratulate you, because there is only the culture of assassination, ethnic purification, which is now prevailing and against the Palestinians. And the Israelis are building more settlements. They are prohibiting all cultural events. When Palestinians want to organize them, they deprive them of a life of dignity. Today, we're turning our back to the rights of the Palestinian people, and we are giving the impression to the whole world that there are no other solution but to create 2 states. But even if that solution is to be adopted, well, it is still a far-fetched hope. And our European friend who spoke before and who talked about the solution of having 2 states, well, you know that we don't talk about this on bearing in mind human rights and all that. So what if this Judaization policy continues? What do you think about the status of Mr. Netanyahu and his the fact that he cannot be brought before justice? Is there any policy? Is there any possibility that one can turn oneself to the International Criminal Court, for instance? We turned to that court at one point, but we see that nowadays the international community